Good evening, everyone. Thanks for joining us. Welcome to the My Horse University and the Extension Horse Quest live webcast titled Parenting Tips at the Horse Show. Our presenter tonight is Karen Waite, an equine extension specialist at Michigan State University and a PhD candidate in sports psychology. Karen teaches and advises equine students in the MSU Department of Animal Science. In her extension roles, she coordinates the Adult Equine Extension Program, the Michigan Equine Survey, and is the Director of Leadership Development for My Horse University. In addition, she oversees the Youth Equine Extension Program and is active with the Extension Horse Quest. She teaches a variety of equine courses, coaches the MSU horse judging team, and is faculty advisor to the MSU equestrian team. With bachelor's degrees in education and animal science and a master's degree in animal science with a nutrition emphasis, Karen is presently working on a doctoral degree in sports psychology with an emphasis on equestrian sport and activity. Please note that you are able to ask questions during the presentation via the text chat to the left of your screen, and questions will be answered throughout the presentation, and there will also be time for questions and answers at the end. Our presentation tonight will be recorded and uploaded to our website if you would like to review it at a later date. And at this time, I will turn our presentation over to Karen.
Thank you. It's great to be here and to be a part of this webcast. This is definitely a topic that gets a lot of discussion in the horse industry, but it's rarely one where we have presentations or research looking at it. So it's great to talk a little bit about it tonight and maybe have the opportunity to give parents some ideas of things that they can do to help their young people at horse shows. What we're going to do tonight is just spend a little bit of time chatting about why we discuss this topic at all, or why would we discuss this topic at all. We'll talk a little bit about why youth participate in showing horses, what parents can do to help their young person as they get involved in showing horses, and then I'll give some suggestions or ideas with regard to how 4-H leaders, coaches, trainers, equestrian team coaches, whatever your role might be, how you can help parents and young people enjoy the horse showing experience even more than they maybe already do. So just to start out, why cover this topic? There's really two pieces to this particular topic. There's the one where oftentimes when you talk about horse shows, you hear about, oh, the very scary horse show mom or horse show parents, and that's maybe part of it, but at the same time, I'd also like to spend some time discussing how we can help things go more smoothly for horse show families. But there's definitely no question that we've heard dramatic stories in the media regarding parents behaving badly at any sporting event, whether it's horse shows or otherwise. A recent poll, in fact, of 23,000 adults in 22 countries resulted in the U.S. being given the dubious distinction of having the poorest behaved parents at sporting events, which I found kind of shocking. Actually, these were, at first I thought, is this, foreign countries that are suggesting that the U.S. has the most poorly behaved parents? But actually, 60% of U.S. residents that were polled in this survey were likely to have seen a parent verbally or physically abusive towards a coach or other official at a youth sporting event. And this was reported in the New York Daily News. And in case you might be thinking, well, this is just observation, this isn't anything that actually occurred, a Journal of Applied Social Psychology article reported that 53% of 340 parents at a youth soccer game really did report getting angry at the game. So we know that there are some issues with parents at sporting events, and in sporting events I would include horse shows under that umbrella. And we know that the problem with poor behavior by adults at sporting events is not only the fact that they're modeling poor behavior for youth, but it takes all the fun out of the activity, which is why youth participate in the first place. And what we want to do is continue to have horse shows be fun, and that's probably a good place for us to start as we talk about this subject. So there's been quite a bit of research to suggest that youth get involved with sports, and that would include horse shows, because they're fun, and they stop participating when some part of it stops being fun. Now, in case you're thinking, my goodness, did they really need to do research to figure that out? The original question typically was, why do you participate in sports? And kids reported that they started participating because of the fun factor. There's definitely so many positive impacts to showing horses, in addition to fun, from developing responsibility and goal-setting behavior, to learning to compete gracefully, to win or lose, and just plain spending time with horses, friends, and families, that we definitely don't want it to stop being fun for young people. We want them to continue to participate. And parents are absolutely a key piece of the horse show team in making sure that it continues to be an enjoyable activity. Without supportive parents, it would be impossible for youth to get to horse shows in the first place in a lot of ways. And they certainly couldn't continue. Parents probably would like to, I would speculate, would like to continue to have their young people enjoy the investment that they've made in making it possible for them to show horses. So anything that we can do to make horse showing continue to be fun is key. And parents definitely play an important role in whether or not showing horses is a fun activity. So how can parents help? I think just being intentional about keeping fun a factor in the horse show. My mother, who's 76 almost now, has been going to horse shows with me for a very long time. I won't say exactly how long, but a very long time. And one thing she always would say was, when it stops being fun, we stop showing horses. And that's a pretty good slogan to live by. And sometimes it's possible to actually plan additional fun into the horse show activity, depending on what the circumstances are. If it's a fair, there's always things to do when the horse show is over, whether it's going to the midway or adding other enjoyable activities to the experience. If it's a circuit show or something to that effect, doing fun things at the end of the day, whether it's swimming in the hotel pool or whatever, are all ways to continue to help making the horse show activity fun as a whole. And I would say another way that parents can help is just by developing ways to keep their own anger in check. There's no question that when youth witness anger, either on the part of their own parents or on the part of other individuals, it's not fun. And so being able to manage emotions, regardless of whether you're the parent or the coach or anybody involved in the horse show activity, is key. So there's a few tips for dealing with anger, whether it's at the horse show or on the sidelines of a soccer game. And those include a few of the following. So taking deep breaths, which would include inhaling for 4 seconds and exhaling for 8 seconds when feeling anger and emotions rise, is one way that people can deal with that. Sucking on a lollipop, which is kind of an interesting one, I think. The lollipop will occupy your mouth rather than having words come out of it when you probably shouldn't be speaking. And it'll also remind you that you're there for your child, not for any other purpose other than to make sure that your child enjoys themselves. Repeating a calm word or phrase or visualizing something relaxing, whether it's a vacation on a beach, can certainly help dissipate anger. Your brain can't be relaxed and angry at the same time. So redirecting the focus is always a good way to help get anger in check. Replacing angry thoughts with rational ones. Just telling yourself that the activity is you're participating in the activity for your child to have fun and for no other reason, can sometimes help to dissipate angry thoughts. Counting to 10 before speaking can certainly diffuse some volatile situations on occasion. And asking the child how they felt they did when they come out of the arena, rather than asking about mistakes or why they didn't win. is one way to dissipate anger, or at least limit what the child is exposed to. And then praising effort first, and then thinking about when you want to comment on the results at a later date can also be helpful. Having a discussion with a child just outside the gate about errors or mistakes or lack of trying even is probably not going to help the situation at all. It's probably better discussed when everyone's emotions are more in check, be it in the truck on the way home or even a day or two later. Another thing that parents can do for children at horse shows is to provide unconditional encouragement and support. No matter what, support of that child. An actual physical presence at horse shows can also be helpful when possible. It may not be possible for both parents to be there, but if one or the other can be there, that's certainly, it makes sporting activities more fun for children. There was a fairly extensive survey done with swimmers, and they interviewed youth participants in competitive swimming, and those young people reported that having unconditional support from their parents and actually having a physical presence at a horse show made their participation in sport just that much more enjoyable. So just that presence certainly helps in the support and enjoyment department. Showing interest in the child's efforts regardless of outcome also was reported by young people to improve the enjoyment of the sporting activity, and talking up the child's efforts to others. And so this is, it's important to point out that the children reported that they wanted their effort pointed out, not necessarily the outcomes, but the fact that they worked hard, that they were a great team with their horse, just something that talks about the effort itself as opposed to outcome. Now, of course, there's going to be a fine line between how much to push and how much is too much. So youth definitely reported that they didn't want their parents to push too much. But this is recognizing that pressures on parents can be great when it comes to showing horses or other sporting activities. But with horses especially, there's a great deal of financial pressure oftentimes. There can be time pressure. It's an all-encompassing activity, and so there can be a lot of pressure put on parents, and parents want to make sure that their children are taking some of those sacrifices seriously, and that's definitely understandable. But at the same time, kids are kids, and they don't always understand the degree of financial investment and time investment that sometimes is made in showing horses. So as hard as it is, sometimes parents just need to keep their emotions in check as it relates to how much to push. Because kids have reported that excessive pushing to practice, take lessons, and even win will detract from the fun factor for some kids. Not all, however. Other young people reported that a slight push can actually enhance their enjoyment of the activity and may be needed at times. They actually recognize that sometimes they need a little extra push. But there's definitely a fine line between positive and negative push for an individual child. So that's the part where it gets tricky. Some kids need that little extra push and actually welcome it, and some would look at it as too much, and that could even be in the same family with siblings. But another thing that's important to notice is that there's a fine line between positive and negative push for an individual horse too. There's more than just the child and the parent involved in this particular balancing act. Horses don't always want to participate in the activity either, and knowing how much is enough for a horse and rider team can be a real delicate balancing act. Sometimes you may have a young rider who needs lots of practice and an older seasoned horse who doesn't need much at all. And so figuring out how to balance that that timing can be tricky. But there's definitely an optimal balance for each horse and rider. There's no cookie cutter approach where one size fits all. So developing the right mix of push for both the child and the horse is something important to focus on for parents. Another thing that youth reported in the USA swimming study was that they wanted their parents to be the parent. They didn't necessarily want their parent to be the coach or the horse trainer. They wanted their parent to provide that unconditional support that we talked about earlier. And that was true even when the parent has credibility as a coach or a trainer. If the parent is doing that, the child still needs unconditional support from someone. And so it needs to be discussed between the parent and the child whether the child wants the parent to be their trainer or their coach, or whether they should be getting assistance from somewhere else as well, so that the parent can just be the parent as opposed to the coach or the horse trainer. Another important thing that parents can do to maintain the kind of fun that young people have at horse shows is to respect officials in show management. Typically, judges at horse shows are well trained, they're competent in multiple events, they go through a great deal of continuing education to make sure that they are competent in the particular classes and disciplines that they're evaluating. And a judge has to look at every exhibitor in the pen. And parents, even though they might insist that they do, typically are focused on their child, as they should be. So they don't necessarily see the entire class. They may not understand the ins and outs and rules of each particular class. And so it's important that parents demonstrate respect for officials and for show management regardless of the circumstance. One way that 4-H leaders or coaches can deal with if they have parents who maybe are showing some disrespect towards officials in show management, it may be useful to have a mock horse show and ask them to judge it. Sometimes just being in the center of the arena and having to place not just the first and the second place horse, but all of them can put a little perspective and realism in the situation so that they have a better understanding of just what that's like. But disrespect for officials in show management definitely models poor sportsmanship, and that isn't necessarily something that we want parents to do. So it is true on occasion that parents may recognize some signs that would suggest that their children are actually becoming burnout on the particular activity. So if a child is avoiding training sessions or avoiding the barn, is showing a lack of effort at lessons or shows, or just a general lackadaisical attitude all the way around, if they're irritable at the barn or having crying spells or more impatience with the horse than usual, or battles of will between the horse and child that maybe weren't happening before, that can sometimes be a sign of burnout in the child, and it certainly warrants some conversation regarding what the problem might be or what might help to solve it. And again, because the team involves the child, the horse, and the parent, it's important to recognize signs of burnout in horses as well. When horses demonstrate tail ringing and ear pinning, back and leg soreness that wasn't necessarily there before, refusals or balking and sulling up and not wanting to go forward, or just overall depression or appearance of tiredness or a rough hair coat, or the horse just isn't as alert as it once was, this can potentially be a sign of burnout in the horse as well, and may be something that warrants further investigation. Horses aren't motorcycles, and so they're living animals, and they get tired if they're overworked, just like people do. And so we need to factor that into the equation when we're taking young people to horse shows and when we're participating in horse shows. On occasion, there will be signs of stress in the entire family when people participate in horse shows. Everyone might be irritable, and everyone comes home from the horse show and no one's talking to anyone. That's potentially an indicator that the activity is a bit too stressful at that particular point. If the child does not necessarily want family members at horse shows, or if they have a sense of dread about going to a horse show, and the whole family does, or they have worries about time and money with regard to horse shows, then this is definitely an indicator that it's time to take a step back and reevaluate the level of participation in the activity. That doesn't mean that anyone necessarily wants to quit or back all the way away, but it might be that the show season is limited, or you cut back on the number of horse shows that are attended, so that people can put things back in perspective and move ahead from there. So what do we do if we see signs of burnout in horses or families or children? The important thing to do is to look for it, to be observant, to encourage conversation when ever possible, when these things start to show up, to insist on good manners no matter what, even if young people are starting to get burnout on the activity. It's always important to display good sportsmanship, good manners, and that's true of the young person and of the parent, regardless. It's possible to recognize that things have gotten a little too intense, but that's still no excuse for bad manners. It's important to consider the horse and the horse's welfare as a part of this puzzle. If a horse is sore or experiencing difficulties, then things are not going to get easier for the young person and the horse until that particular issue is addressed. So that's something that coaches or 4-H leaders or equestrian team coaches and outside parties can consider and step in and help with. And it may be as simple as just needing to do something different for the horse or the rider or the family as a whole. It may be that rather than go to a horse show for a weekend, maybe the family needs to take a trip to the lake or somewhere else for a weekend. Or maybe rather than going to a horse show, taking the horse on a trail ride or doing a different class even. Maybe if it's a horse that does predominantly rail classes, maybe adding trail to the mix might make things a bit more interesting and exciting for the horse. So these are all things that can be considered when burnout or stress becomes an issue. So we've talked a little bit about the stressful aspect of horse shows, or the things that sometimes happen that make horse shows not quite as enjoyable as they once were. But there are also things that parents can do to keep competitors mentally and physically ready, and to maybe stave off some of the burnout that we've discussed. A few of those things, and this may be that if our parent is no longer going to be the coach or the horse trainer, they may need other things to do. So making sure that young people have plenty of water or drink plenty of water, and horses too. Making sure that youth eat appropriately, providing healthy lunches and snacks over the course of the the show rather than the usual concession stand food, or some concession stand food. I shouldn't say the usual. But making sure that exhibitors have plenty of water and healthy food on a regular basis. Making sure that normal sleep schedules are maintained can also help horse show activities be more enjoyable for everyone involved. And practicing at regular and appropriate intervals can be helpful too. Like I said, there are some horses that maybe only need 20 minutes of warm-up, and they do much better with 20 minutes of warm-up and a trip back to the stall to wait for the class, as opposed to 4 hours of riding. Some horses just aren't suited to having young people ride them all day and camp on them at the horse show. And so when the time comes to actually compete, they're so worn out that they can't behave appropriately. So maybe 4-H leaders and coaches can provide some input to help families in those circumstances as well, so that horses are actually ready and willing to compete when the time comes. And children are too. Other things that parents can do is to make sure that young people actually have time to play with their friends and socialize. I know when my husband was young, he was involved in a family or was part of a family that showed horses extensively, and he wasn't necessarily that interested. He was much more interested in going and playing with his friends and socializing as opposed to actually showing. And that's an important part of the whole experience. So making sure that kids have the opportunity to do that is important. Parents can also be responsible for clothing and equipment. My mother, again, who's been following me around at horse shows for a very long time, to this day would say that she's not sure which is the halter and which is the bridle, which I don't think is really true. But she is very involved in making sure that clothing is ready and clean and prepared for particular classes, and that the right equipment's available. So she's found a role to play at horse shows and really enjoys it. And then the important thing to keep and help young people keep is a sense of humor and a sense of perspective at horse shows. Horse shows are definitely a recreational activity that we're trying to do for fun. So keeping a sense of humor about the whole situation is definitely key in having it continue to be fun. Parents, coaches, and trainers can also help children set realistic goals about their horse showing activity, and we'll talk a little bit about the SMART goal setting system in just a second. They can also review those goals periodically with their young people at an appropriate time and set new ones if old ones are met. And this is one way to focus rather than focusing on the outcome or the blue ribbon. This is a way that parents can teach young people to focus on the effort of the actual horse show experience as opposed to the ribbon at the end. So if goals are set when the young person comes out, then the adult can talk to that young person about whether or not they met their goal for that particular day. Did they nail that 360 like they wanted to? Or if not, what can they do to make sure that they do that next time? It may be possible or appropriate for a youth and a parent to sit down with a notebook and develop a few goals and write those down and then review them on the way home from the horse show. That might be a regular activity. When setting goals, though, it's important to set the right kinds of goals. Sometimes we have a tendency to set goals like qualify for the state horse show, which really, while noble and certainly something to shoot for in the long term, is not a particularly smart goal. And the reason for that is that it isn't specific, measurable. It may be one or two of these things, but it really isn't a specific, measurable, attainable, realistic, and relevant to the child and time-sensitive kind of goal. A smart goal would be to break the entire larger goal of qualifying for the state horse show down into smaller, more manageable. So as an example, in showmanship, a specific goal would be to accurately perform a 360 on the right hind foot 5 out of 8 times attempted. And that would be specific. It would be measurable. It would be potentially attainable. It may be that the young person needs to have some outside help to learn how to perform a 360 or have the horse perform a 360 on the right hind foot. It certainly is realistic, and it would be potentially relevant to the child if they understood that a right hind pivot in a showmanship class would be scored higher than a left hind foot pivot. That might be relevant to them. And then to add a piece on to the end suggesting that the 5 out of 8 times would be completed by the 1st of July. That would make it time sensitive. After the 1st of July, that goal could be reviewed by the parent and the child, or the 4-H leader and the child, and they could go back to setting goals if it had been achieved. A few other things that can help maintain the fun factor in showing horses would be to develop a riding resource room, which is an idea that was created by Janet Sasson-Edgett, who has an excellent book on sports psychology as it relates to horses. And what happens with a riding resource room with youth, I mean, you can do this with anyone. There are developmentally appropriate ways to go about it. But with young people, a riding resource room can be as simple as taking a piece of paper, drawing a big square on it, and then inside the square is the riding resource room. And the young person can cut out pictures of, maybe put pictures of their horse, songs that inspire them, other things that they find inspiring. It would be kind of like a scrapbook, but all positive things that encourage them and motivate them to ride and to ride well. And those things would go on the inside of the square. On the outside of the square, they would put maybe negative things, or things they're anxious about, or things they worry about related to showing horses. And then they could put their riding resource room up in the trailer, and when it's time to show, they can think about the things that are inside the riding resource room that motivate them to do well, and focus on those things to have a more positive riding experience. So as they develop and get older, they may not have to actually do a physical one. They can think about it or visualize it mentally without actually doing the piece of paper activity. But it is a good exercise, and I have done it with young people at Exploration Day sessions, and they really seem to enjoy it. Other options would be maybe developing a lucky dance or song before the young person goes into the arena. Excuse me, sorry about that. Excuse me. So, a lucky dance. Our MSU equestrian team has a lucky dance that they do for each rider before they enter the pen, and it certainly seems to lighten the mood, and I don't know, it seems to be lucky. They were the top team in the region this year, so more than anything though, they seem to enjoy doing that and supporting one another. And so developing a dance or song can be a great way to bond with the child and to encourage them as they enter the class. And then the same with rituals or symbols. Specific lucky tokens, rabbit's feet, stuffed animals that go to the horse show with you. Those are all things that can maybe redirect the intensity and the seriousness that sometimes become part of the horse showing activity. And I don't want to suggest that it isn't a serious activity. It really is. It's competition. That's what competition is about, is doing well. But there are ways to go at it that maybe can help us avoid some of the activity or the things that we've seen in the media where parents might be behaving badly, or displays of poor sportsmanship are given. So with that, I guess I would take any questions at this point if folks have them, or even if you have ideas or things that you do to help your young people have fun at the horse show and help parents manage their emotions as well. I'd certainly welcome those at this time. Nobody ever wants to be the first one. It will be archived, so yes, you can definitely replay it. It will be archived on the My Horse University website, so it can be used. Well, good. I hope that I'm glad that you feel like there are parents that need it and that you'd like to share it with them. Anyone else? Ashley Quall, are you having a good summer? Ashley's one of my students. My daughter is super competitive and I'm not. Any advice? I think that this could actually be an excellent combination, Michelle, because I'm thinking that you might be able to temper things with some of the activities that we talked about here. You'll probably be more apt to maintain a sense of humor and a sense of perspective that you can model for your daughter. While she may be super competitive, you can temper some of that. There'll be times when she may be too competitive, and so you'll definitely temper that, and you'll be supportive and encouraging her no matter what. And like Amanda says, you'll definitely be that consistent support and encouragement that she needs no matter what. You may, how long have you been involved in horse showing, Michelle? Five years? Okay. I was going to say that it may be that you find yourself getting a little bit more competitive, but actually, I really think that this will be helpful. Is it a problem for your daughter or a problem for you at this point? Okay, well, maybe while Michelle's adding her thoughts with regard to specifics, I can respond to Jill's question regarding how do we get through shows later in the day when both horse and rider are getting really tired. It's definitely important to make sure that there are breaks scheduled, that the horse has the opportunity to go back to the stall and the rider has the opportunity to sit down and drink plenty of water. It's amazing how water can help when exhaustion or tiredness takes hold. A lot of times that tiredness has to do with dehydration, and so water can certainly help, but definitely resting. And frankly, if things get to the point where horse and rider are fighting and things are getting really intense and potentially dangerous, it may be worth scratching classes towards the end of the day if it's just too much. I mean, I know people get serious about all-around awards and that kind of thing, but that's something that both horse and rider need to be physically fit enough to do and mentally fit enough to do. And so developing that kind of fitness may be needed, but definitely it's something that you have to start to plan at the beginning of the day. You know, maybe only 10 or 15 minute warm-ups, and then going, or 5-minute warm-ups if the horse needs. You may experiment with seeing if the horse needs any warm-up at all. It may be that 2 minutes of walking around and then going in the arena is enough. I actually have a horse that I have a very specific schedule where I lunge him first thing in the morning. We get ready for showmanship, do showmanship, ride for 20 minutes at lunch, put him away, ride for 5 or 10 minutes before the class, and then go straight in. And that's how we get through the entire day. Let's see. And Michelle's daughter, it's only a problem when she gets upset with herself and the horse when she doesn't do as well as she thought she should do. The part about the fact that she doesn't do as well as she had thought she should do, one thing I would suggest, is she involved in horse judging at all with a 4-H club or anything like that? Because sometimes that activity can be very helpful because it requires that young people learn the specific rules and what judges are looking for. And once you have an idea of what judges are looking for and just how difficult it can be to sort out everyone, you're less tough on yourself when maybe you don't get seen like you thought you should, if that makes sense. So maybe having her watch, there's also quite a few judging tapes, but another thing you may want to do is find, if you know a judge or somebody who is an apprentice judge, to have her sit with that individual outside the arena and actually place some classes, big ones, not just 3 or 4 horses, but place all the way through. And once she gets a feel for how challenging that can be, she may be less hard on herself. Do we have any other questions? Well, if not, I appreciate all of you taking the time to listen to tonight's webcast. And again, it will be archived, so you'll be able to listen to it at a future date.
Thank you, Karen, so much for your presentation tonight. And I want to thank all of you for participating. Later this week, you will receive an invitation to participate in an online survey about tonight's webcast. And if you would please take a few minutes to give us your feedback, we would really appreciate it. Our free monthly webcast will not be running through the summer, but they will return in September, and the dates and topics will be available on our website soon. Be sure to check back for the fall lineup. You can use the summer to catch up on any webcasts you may have missed by watching the recordings on our website at myhorseuniversity.com. Also, My Horse University is now on Facebook, so become our fan to get the most up-to-date information on our events, courses, and more. And again, as we mentioned, the webcast was recorded and will be uploaded to our website by the end of the week. You can feel free to send us your comments and suggestions to info@myhorseuniversity.com. And thanks again, and have a great evening.